So we are getting connected now, and just want to welcome everybody that's hanging out with us in the live broadcast today. Please jump in. You're welcome to drop comments as we go about this, and we'll get started in just one moment here. So, love to hear your questions and things like that. Welcome to the School of Kingdom Writers podcast. My name is Brad Paquette. I'll be the host of the podcast today. And today I'm going to be joined by Katie Pozzuoli. So Katie is one of our Arche Year authors. I'm excited to talk to her. I think that she has got a lot of really valuable things to share. And one of the big things is that she's been through our Arche Year program. And so in just 8 months, we started this thing in September. And since that time, I mean, even the first 4 weeks was just instruction. So in 8 months or less at this point, she's crafted a complete novel manuscript. She's built an authors platform that is vibrant and growing, and she's doing some cool things there. So I'm looking forward to having her share with you guys about what that experience has been like and about some of the things that she's working on. I think that's going to be really valuable. Before we go there, I do want to share with you that you can still grab our free publishing guide that we call the 3 Publishing Paths at freepublishingguide.com. So that is a free handbook that is going to give you some perspective on what the publishing industry looks like. So if you are interested in publishing a book, if you're getting close to that point in your journey, or sometimes it's even helpful just to know kind of, what's coming, where are you headed with this whole thing? That handbook is going to be really, really helpful for you. So you can grab that at freepublishingguide.com. Once again, that's freepublishingguide.com, and that's gonna relay you directly to our website where you can sign up and get that download. And I think it'll be helpful for you. So with no further ado, Katie, welcome so much. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brad. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. And so you've been on quite a journey for the past 8 months. So tell me, how do you go from, 8 months or so ago, you're thinking like, maybe this is something I could explore. Maybe I'd like to try this, to in the position that you are in now, where you have a complete manuscript and you have this audience that is growing and things like that. How does that feel? And how did you make that work?
Well, it feels amazing. It's not lost on me that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And I know that there are a lot of memes going around right now about people who've been wearing the same pair of sweatpants for the last year. And no problem if that's what you're doing. But I feel just really proud of myself to be able to look back and say that the last 8 or 9 months have been some of the most productive and enjoyable of my life in recent years. And
That's
so,
amazing.
yeah, and the way that it happened was just a little bit at a time. You know, I wrote the novel about an hour at a time over the course of 5 or 6 mornings a week for about 5 months. And there's still a lot to be done on that, but it was just taking one little bit at a time. It sounds like an enormous task to write a novel, and it is in some ways, but it can be broken down into really manageable steps.
Well, absolutely. And I think that one of your keys has been what you just said, that this was a morning thing for you, right? Like you've got 3 kids at home, uh, and 2 of those are not normally home all day, but they were home all day for a large part of this, right? Due to COVID stuff. So you were getting up like early in the morning to make this happen, right?
Yeah, during the novel writing process, I was getting up at 5 o'clock every day and I was writing for an hour to an hour and a half. And then I would just set it aside. That was pretty much all I did when we were focusing on the novel. And, it just came together over time. We spent about a month plotting out the novel, and that helped so that I had a roadmap every time I sat down. I knew what scene I was working on, I knew what was coming next, but it was just those manageable steps. And yes, my kids were home for most of that time.
No, and I think that's so smart, and I admire your discipline, which you certainly brought into the program with you. I find that I have the most control of my day in the morning, and then from there on, it's like less and less control. Like we can make like a graph, right, of the amount of control I have over my time, and the morning is so important. But like humans don't naturally get up at 5 a.m. to spend an hour and a half writing. Like, so what? How did you motivate yourself? Like, what made it worth it for you?
Well, I had made a commitment to this class, and not just to the class in terms of time, but I also made the financial commitment of joining the cohort.
Yeah.
And I did that specifically because I knew that if I made that financial commitment, it would be the required accountability for me to show up and do it. I wasn't going to waste that money.
Yeah.
And, it was a joint decision. My husband and I had agreed together that this was an investment worth making for me. And so, he would also have held my feet to the fire if there was a point at which I thought, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And
Did that
so
ever happen?
no, not during the writing process at all. So so that was part of it, that commitment that I had made, and also knowing that I had the accountability of turning in a word count to you every week, and that is a motivating factor for me, having outside accountability. um, and in terms of getting up early, I don't get up at 5 o'clock anymore, because that was starting to be a little rough. But I I just had to go to bed early. It's just the really practical things, like, what am I willing to sacrifice to make time for this thing that I have decided in this season is really important. And so I'm not willing to sacrifice sleep, but I am willing to sacrifice staying up later and watching a show or reading for longer. And so that was what I did.
That's awesome. Well, and so tell us about this book. What have you been working on? What's it about?
Yeah. So in my novel, the protagonist, her name is Elena, she finds herself questioning whether the work that she has thus far spent her life on is what she is really meant to continue doing. And so she's in this season of questioning her vocation. And during that time, she meets a woman who she comes to understand is a victim of human trafficking. And the rest of the novel, Elena is trying to help her friend out of the situation that she's in. And along the way, she makes some mistakes. She doesn't do everything right all the way. But that is the gist of the novel. And I am really excited about it.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean, it's still in progress so far, but it's you're on the right track. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'm in the final stages of editing, and then I'll be turning it into you to get your edits. But yeah, I'm excited. It's a whole story that makes sense.
Right. And that's a good first step, right? And I heard this quote a long time ago. I've never been able to track it down, even like with Google and all the resources at our disposal, that said that all first drafts are autobiography, or all first novels are autobiographies. Like, to what
Okay.
degree is that true with your novel? Where does Katie Pozzuoli come through in your protagonist and your other characters?
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of myself in Elena, who is the main character. We have similar personality traits and similar values, similar ways of seeing the world. The work that we're doing is not the same, but even her family, I kind of modeled after my family in terms of the kids. And so I can definitely see the autobiographical nature of it in that way. It's a story that I've never found myself in the midst of, but human trafficking and the fight against that is something that's been important to me for a long time. And so that was kind of a natural point of conflict to introduce into this story.
Yeah, what makes human trafficking something that, pricks at your heart?
Well, I think that I first really heard about it and understood it when I read the book Half the Sky by Nicholas Kristof and his wife, Cheryl, I believe is her name. And they wrote about just the plight of women around the world, and about how when women are free, when women are working, when women are able to contribute to society, it not only improves their lives and the lives of their family, but it also drastically improves their communities. And so they talked in there about human trafficking, and women are not the only victims, but they are, the majority of victims of human trafficking. And so it was just so hard for me to believe at the time that that is something that is still happening in the world today.
Right.
Um, and so I have, been able to find some organizations that I've appreciated the work that they're doing, and follow them and partner with them in the fight to end human trafficking.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so, as part of the program, you've written this novel, and then you've also been developing your author's platform. which for anybody listening, when we say that, we mean, developing kind of an audience of people that are following Katie, that are paying attention to what she's doing and listening when she talks, because she's somebody that should be heard. And so to develop that, you've chosen a nonfiction kind of niche, something that you're going to help people with, bring value to people's lives. You want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the online space that I am building is a place that will help women to build sustainable habits of self-care. Rather than thinking about this commercialized version of self-care that often talks about pedicures and chocolate cake, I want to help women see that they can build habits in their lives and they can take action in ways that might not seem fun or exciting, but that will really help them to show up in the ways that they need to show up for their families and their community and their own lives. So it's real self-care for real life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. And as I told you the other day, that's not a space that I spend a lot of time in. But it seems like there is a need for that, because almost all of the stuff that I see about that is like kind of, this pamper yourself kind of approach to self-care. And that's probably not realistic. In fact, that probably brings a lot of guilt for a lot of women, right? That like you can't get a day at the spa or something like that, right?
Yeah, when I think back to my early days of motherhood, almost a decade ago now, I I had this idea that if I could just get away for long enough that I would come back refreshed. And I have a supportive husband who was willing to give me that time when he was able to, but it never worked. And so what I have come to realize through a lot of trial and error over the years is that it's not getting away that's refreshing. There's time and space for that where that is really valuable and necessary, but it's really building the habits in my own life that will make me strong enough, both physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, to show up for my kids, to show up for myself and for my husband and for my community. And so that's not something that can be done in like a long weekend once or twice a year. That's something
Right.
that really has to be part of everyday life.
Yeah. Do you have like one tip that you could share now? Like,
That's a good question. Um, so I think that it's helpful to think holistically about our lives. And so sometimes we just need to think about where do we need where do we need the help right now? And so, if there was a woman who was feeling physically exhausted, I would tell her that she might need to go to bed earlier, like we talked about a few minutes ago, to get the rest that she needs. Or maybe she needs to take a walk in the afternoon or during her lunch break so that she can get outside and be energized for the rest of the day. Um, so I think self care is not necessarily prescriptive because every person is unique. But I do think it's helpful when you're thinking about, like, I need help in some area, to think, where am I struggling, and what might really help me there. And so um sometimes self-care is something like making an appointment with a counselor, or getting a checkup with your doctor. And neither of those things is particularly fun and not a particularly Instagrammable moment.
right.
But they're still important for our total health and functioning.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And one of the things that I think everybody in the program has had to overcome is this idea of like, I'm going to be an expert in some area, right? Like, I'm going to choose something and I'm going to just like devote myself to it and become an expert. How have you processed that? Like, how have you come to make this your own?
Yeah, it has been hard. That's been one of the hardest things for me about building a platform,
And that's good,
because
right? I mean, we're supposed to be humble and not put ourselves out there as like the some kind of guru or something. So like I want to recognize
right.
that too, that like that's a good Christian feeling, I think, to be like, I'm not trying to draw people to myself. So anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's also helpful because in questioning, do I have anything to say here? I've been able to be more critical about what I really do have to offer. And so there are a lot of women who are offering self-care tips. There are a lot of counselors and therapists that I follow, but I'm not them because I'm not a professional. I have done this through trial and error, through a decade of mothering, throughout my adult life, figuring out what it takes for me to be healthy. And so even though I share a lot of specific tips on my blog right now, what I'm really hoping is that women can see that this is a unique thing for each of us, that each of us has a way that we function best, and that what works for me might not work for everyone else. And so I want to give women a wide array of options for how they might take care of themselves, feed themselves, energize themselves for their lives, but to know that what I have done might not work for my friend, but that she has the ability, or the women who are following me online have the ability to figure out what it is that works well for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what has been most surprising for you or most fun or however you want to answer that question about this whole platform building? Has anything taken you by surprise?
Well, I was initially surprised at how time consuming it was, because just getting it off the ground takes a lot of time, a lot of commitment and energy. And so that I maybe wasn't fully prepared for, but now I'm in a better rhythm. And so week to week, I have a decent idea of knowing how long it's going to take me, how much time I need to spend on my online work for the week. So that was surprising. Um, I have found it really fun in general to build a platform. There's also a lot more immediate gratification to online work. So
Sure.
I can write, edit, publish, and share a blog post all in one day. And obviously, a novel does not come together that quickly. And I also have really enjoyed the design work in terms of just creating Instagram posts and things like that. I really have had fun with that side of things as well.
Yeah, and you're good at it too. So where can people see what you're talking about?
So I am online. I'm on Instagram at Katie Pozzuoli. So it's Katie, and the last name is Pozzzuoli. I'm on Facebook as Katie Pozzuoli Writer. And then my blog is my blog and website are katiepozzoli.com.
Yeah, so you should definitely go to the spots, check it out, give Katie a follow, and you've got some cool resources coming down the line. I don't think you haven't launched any resources like downloads or anything like that yet, right?
I haven't, but by the end of this month or early June, I will have a resource for women that gives very specific and concrete ideas for how they can care for themselves in a holistic way, looking at different aspects of their lives. As I mentioned earlier, spiritual, emotional, physical, but also some other things that we might not think about, vocational, financial, environmental, things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I don't know if this is specifically you, but I know that several members of the cohort, it's been cool to watch that they kind of did this platform building stuff kind of because I said they had to, and kind of did it tentatively. But now, like you're saying, there is this, like you can see immediate results with that, like you're really helping people with something in real time while you're still putting together like the long-term stuff in the background. So I think that is really cool, the value that you're bringing to the world and the way that you're helping to shape things like immediately, seeing effect right away. Um, so as back to the book writing, like what has most surprised you about that process?
Well, related to what I said earlier, I think what surprised me the most was that it was something that could be done in a relatively short amount of time. Um, the writing itself of my novel took about 4.5 or 5 months. Um, Plotting it out took another month prior to that. And the editing process, of course, is taking several months after. But the fact that I have a whole novel in really rough form in that amount of time was really shocking.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. And so what else, tell people about your experience with Arche Year. Like, what has that been like for you? What do you feel like you've gotten out of the experience aside from like the tangible stuff that you can touch and feel now?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that you've done a really good job of, Brad, is breaking everything down step by step so that it's so manageable. And you come at everything just with a really calm presence and a can do attitude. And I think that that made me believe that I think I can do this too. Um, and so, and you have also done a good job of demystifying the whole process of writing, publishing, online work, all of that. Was just, it seems like so much to tackle. And the fact that we have done this over the course of, like you said, 8 months is really hard to believe. But especially if you look at our cohort and what everyone is producing, it's just really amazing, the caliber of work that people are bringing, putting forth. And I do think that's just because of how you've made it a really approachable topic. I have also really enjoyed being a part of the cohort, just the camaraderie of walking through this process with other people who are doing the same thing and can commiserate and help troubleshoot and just support one another has been a really good experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. And thank you so much for saying that. That's nice of you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Um, so what's your level of optimism today about, publishing a book and, the future prospects as a writer? How are you feeling? And you can be honest.
Um, I'm feeling pretty optimistic about it. As I look towards the future and the next several months, I can see, like, I am prioritizing building a platform right now because I know that that's the current step that I need to be taking in order to be able to bring this book into the world. I'm
Mhm.
starting to think about what it might look like to continue writing and what a new novel might be about. I don't have any ideas yet, but I'm mulling it over. And so, on a scale of like 1 to 10, I would say I'm feeling like 7 or 8. This book is going to come out in the world someday. And if not this one, another one. And so yeah, it's exciting to me. I still don't know which path I plan to take for publishing, if I'm going to try to find an agent or if I plan to self-publish. I think I'm going to just continue to work for a few more months and kind of see how I'm feeling about it at that time.
Yeah, that's smart. That's smart. And I think how your platform develops and kind of letting that have a life of its own a little bit will help with that too. And so, like Katie mentioned, if words like agents and self-publishing are a little uh, uh, a bit of a mystery right now for you, you can get that free guide, and it'll really help. Really goes through a lot of what we covered in the Arche Year program. But Katie, last question: how has your understanding of being a writer, or kind of that word calling? I know not everybody uses that word calling in the same way, but how has that changed for you? Um, because I know that you early on in your life you thought that being a writer might be a thing that you would pursue, right? But then that was like total back burner out of mind for a long time. And I guess maybe you could share just a little bit about that story. What brought that back to the forefront, and how has your understanding of what that means shifted?
Yeah, so I do tend to be personally a little wary of using the word calling for my own life. I do think that's something that kind of, for me at least, I want to see that confirmed by community and other people. But so prior to this class, I don't think I would have used the word calling in relation to my writing. But as I committed myself to the work of writing over the last 8 months, I've just seen a lot of good fruit in my life. And so I think that that's confirmation to me that at least for this season, I'm on the right track. I see a lot of discipline developing. I see a lot of joy through the process of writing. Um, as I said earlier, starting in the middle of a pandemic, a big project like this, I think has been for me um, just kind of a way to stay out of the stress of life that so many have been feeling. I have felt that too. I'm not above it, but um, I just see so much productivity and so much happiness basically coming out of this that tells me that I'm on the right track when it comes to writing.
Yeah, I think the Bible says something that like that, right? Like, fruit and things like that. It seems to be a
Yeah,
theme I've encountered in there. So,
it has been there at least a couple places.
couple times. All right. Well, that's cool, Katie. And I really appreciate just your candor and you sharing with us today. And of course, I just want you to see a lot of new followers and have people connect with the value that you're putting out into the world too. So, once again, can you remind us how we can connect with you and why we should do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to connect with women in particular who are looking for ways to build habits that will sustainably help them to care for themselves over the course of their life. And so you can find me. The easiest thing would be to find me at my website, katiepozzoli.com, and that will lead you to all of the other locations.
Cool. Yeah, and if you're watching this live on Facebook, we'll drop stuff in the comments with all of Katie's links, and it'll be in the notes as well if you're listening to this on a podcast platform somewhere. So, Katie, I just love to pray for you now. Would that be all right?
That sounds great. Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're watching this now with us live, please pray. If you're listening to the recording, your prayers are still good. So please join me. So Jesus, I'm really thankful for Katie. I'm really thankful just for the opportunity that you've given me to walk alongside her in this journey over the past 8 months. And we just ask for your crazy good blessings on everything that Katie's doing. I know that you're at work in this, Lord. And of course, we never know exactly what outcomes you intend for a particular person or a particular venture. But Lord, we know that you're in it, and we know that when you're in it, there's good fruit. And so we just look forward. We anticipate all that good fruit, the immediate things that Katie has seen, the changes in her life, and the way I know she's impacted people online in real time. And she's been just such a positive influence on her cohort as well. We thank you for that fruit, but we also look for the long term fruit. God, we look forward to the day that that lots of lives in far and distant places are going to be touched and changed because of the work that you're putting on Katie's heart, because of the way that you're developing her, and because of the way that she's saying yes to what you're doing. So we bless that in your mighty name, Lord. Just as your deputies on the earth, we say yes to what you're doing. We bless it. We thank you so much for her. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Katie, for joining us. So once again, katiepozzoli.com is a great place to start. And you can find links to all those other places where you can connect with her. So if you're listening to this on a podcast platform somewhere, or you're on YouTube or Facebook, please do the things that you do for a podcast, like subscribe to it and like it or share it, or leaving a review is always super helpful. If you're on YouTube, you're supposed to smash that subscribe button, I think is the lingo the kids are using these days. But we really appreciate your help. We appreciate you sharing this broadcast with others so that they can, be encouraged like Katie's been encouraged. So once again, grab that free publishing guide at freepublishingguide.com. It's easy to remember. It's easy to spell. It'll really help you if you're on that path to becoming a writer yourself. So thanks for joining us today. Be blessed, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a good one.